We discussed four general categories of informal fallacies, including fallacies of relevance, fallacies of presumption, and fallacies of ambiguity, along with fallacies of diversion. In this video, we'll be speaking on fallacies of relevance, which are the first category of informal fallacies. In fallacies of relevance, the arguer presents evidence that is not relevant for logically establishing their conclusion. The reason why fallacies of relevance stick around is because the evidence seems relevant, meaning it feels relevant. Fallacies of relevance prey on our likes and dislikes. Indeed, the very first fallacy of relevance is called appeal to emotion. Appeal to emotion or emotional appeals can target any number of emotions, from fear to pity, and from love and compassion to hate and aversion. For the most part, appeals to emotion of any kind are not relevant for establishing the conclusion. Here is an example. I know the allegations against the governor seem serious. However, he's in his 80s now and he fought for our country in the Korean War, earning a Purple Heart. We don't want to put an elderly veteran through the ordeal of a trial. Then I urge you to drop the charges. In this example, the arguer appeals to our feelings of pity and compassion and to our positive feelings about the governor. We might admire the governor for his military service and feel sympathy for his advanced age. But are our feelings relevant in making the decision about whether to drop criminal charges? Notice that the arguer says nothing about the content of the charges or about whether the governor is innocent or guilty. Indeed, the arguer says absolutely nothing that's relevant to the conclusion. How we feel about somebody is not a logical determinant to use in judging guilt or innocence. Secondly, there are ad hominem attacks. The ad hominem attack is most often committed by a person who is arguing against some other person's position. Ad hominem in Latin means toward the man. It is so named because when someone commits this fallacy, the reason they give for their conclusion concerns the characteristics of the person they are arguing against rather than that person's position. For example, the arguer may verbally attack the person by making fun of their appearance, intelligence, or character. They can highlight something about the person's circumstances, like their job or their past, or they can insinuate that the person is a hypocrite. You may wonder then why such arguments are effective, and one reason is sloppy associative reasoning, wherein we problematically assume that characteristics held by an arguer will be transferred to their argument. Another related reason is that too often we allow ourselves to be ruled by emotion rather than reason. If we are made to feel negatively toward a person, those feelings can cloud assessment of their arguments. There are other types of ad hominem attacks, and the most successful is probably the one called tu quoque, which means you too in Latin. When someone commits this sort of ad hominem fallacy, they attempt to undermine a person's argument by pointing to real or perceived hypocrisy on the part of the person. They assert or imply that their opponent in the past or currently has done or said things that are inconsistent with their current argument. Often this is used as a defensive maneuver. Take the example of a teenager whose father just caught her smoking cigarettes and reprimanded her. If she knows that her father smoked when he was her age, her defensive response will be, "You did it too." She is likely to think he is a hypocrite who should not be heeded. However, the daughter reasons poorly. First, a person's actions have no bearing on the strength of their arguments or the truth of their claims, unless, of course, the person's arguments are about their own actions. That her father smoked in the past or smokes currently has no bearing on whether smoking is in fact dangerous. Smoking does not suddenly cease to be dangerous because the person explaining the dangers of smoking is a smoker. Then there is appeal to force. In the appeal to force, someone in a position of power threatens to bring down unfortunate consequences upon anyone who dares to disagree with a proffered proposition. Although it is rarely developed so explicitly, a fallacy of this type might propose, for example, if you do not agree with my political opinions, you will receive a grade F for this course. I believe that Herbert Hoover was the greatest president of the United States. Therefore, he was the greatest president of the United States. It should be clear that even if all of the premises were true, the conclusion could nevertheless be false. Since that is possible, arguments of this form are plainly invalid. While this might be an effective way to get you to agree, or at least to pretend to agree with my position, it offers no grounds for believing it to be true. Then we move on to appeal to pity. Turning this on its head, an appeal to pity tries to win acceptance by pointing out the unfortunate consequences that will otherwise fall upon the speaker and others for whom we would then feel sorry. An example of this is, I am a single parent, solely responsible for the financial support of my children. If you give me this traffic ticket, I will lose my license and be unable to drive to work. If I cannot work, my children and I will become homeless and may starve to death. Therefore, you should not give me this traffic ticket. Again, the conclusion may be false, that is, perhaps I should be given the ticket even if the premises are all true, so the argument is fallacious. Then there comes the appeal to authority, in which the opinion of someone famous or accomplished in another area of expertise is supposed to guarantee the truth of a conclusion. Thus, for example, Federal Reserve Chair Alan Greenspan believes that spiders are insects. Therefore, spiders are insects. As a pattern of reasoning, this is clearly mistaken. No proposition must be true because some individual, however talented or successful, happens to believe it. Even in areas where they have some special knowledge or skill, expert authorities could be mistaken. We may accept their testimony as inductive evidence, but never as deductive proof of the truth of a conclusion. Personality is irrelevant to truth. An appeal to ignorance proposes that we accept the truth of a proposition unless an opponent can prove otherwise. Thus, for example, no one has conclusively proven that there is no intelligent life on the moons of Jupiter. Therefore, there is intelligent life on the moons of Jupiter. But of course, the absence of evidence against a proposition is not enough to secure its truth. What we don't know could nevertheless be so. Finally, the fallacy of the irrelevant conclusion tries to establish the truth of a proposition by offering an argument that actually provides support for an entirely different conclusion. An example of this is, all children should have ample attention from their parents. Parents who work full-time cannot give ample attention to their children. Therefore, mothers should not work full-time. Here the premises might support some conclusion about working parents generally, but do not secure the truth of a conclusion focused on women alone and not on men. Although clearly fallacious, this procedure may succeed in distracting its audience from the point that is really at issue.